kill the legend.
D&D from A to Z, spells for you and spells for me. We will see what we will see today. Look roar, nerd roar forevermore. Let's explore some ancient lore. Hey, hey. Hello, welcome. My name is Jordan Maywood, and I am the Alphabetical DM, or Dungeon Master if you prefer. Join me as I literally pour forth from my mind the roleplay game knowledge I have, such as it is. On that note, I should push this button and let you know that everything I say just about will be an opinion. So please keep that in mind, as arguing that your opinion is more valid than someone else's is allowed. I'm not going to stop you. I'm not a maniac in that way, particularly. But, you might be foolish for doing so. I don't know. I'm not an expert. I'm a lover, not an expert, as they say on the podcast Star Trek The Next Conversation, starring Matt Myra and Matt Gorley? No, different one. Anyways, I'm going to push a button that will take us to our main subject like this. Yes. Okay, so, rules versus fun when it comes to role-playing games. Now, that is probably a little on the clickbaity side, because I don't necessarily think they have to fight one another. It could be rules and fun, which I think is more often the case. I found this online. I didn't make this, I want to say right off the bat, and I think it's a fairly good representation of what one can experience when playing an RPG style game. I am more of the mind that rules are less important than fun, but I also understand that that makes people angry when you say things like that. And probably the people more rules heavy, or rules 100% of the time, no matter what, raw rules as written, that or nothing, that or you're not playing the game the way it's supposed to be played. Those people are often very vocal, so I think maybe that's why that side of the argument gets a little more oomph from time to time, let's say. So I come from it from a different sort of standpoint for the most part. I like custom mechanics, which we'll be doing episodes where I'll sort of delve into some of those. But my sort of general theory, and this is going notes free as I do, is that that sort of rule of cool can often sway me from what the actual rules as written are. So, for example, let me just throw out one off the top of my head. I found this, I forget where, it's called the Magnificent Seven. It's not a rule anywhere other than whoever made this up. It's that if you roll a 7 on an attack roll, and if you adequately put a little gusto into it, explain how your hits the bad guy, that will count as a hit. If you're unfamiliar with this as a sort of mechanic, normally when you roll a 7 to attack someone, you're probably going to miss. So this goes against that rule as written. But it adds to the fun, it adds to potentially the story, it adds to the player excitement, it adds, for me, it adds to the DM excitement. It makes it perhaps a little easier for the player in the long run. If they're rolling a lot of 7s, normally it's going to be misses. Here it's cool little hits. And I think that's probably where some of the friction between the two comes from. The fact that rules often make the game harder. There's not often rules that, when in place, make for an easier time for the player. You could debate that probably. I'm just saying that normally when you're foregoing rules, it's in the favor of making things easier, which why it shouldn't be rules versus fun, it's rules and fun, because some people get their fun from having a difficult difficult Dark Souls-esque time while playing D&D. That's not how I have my fun, and that's not how I really run my games. So that's why it's important to find a table that suits your style somewhere in this thing. Game immersion. Yeah, see, do rules necessarily take away from immersion? I would argue no. So that's why it is necessarily 100% accurate. But, you know, somewhat. Let's move on to the ratings of things, which is why you're all here. Let's face it. Yes, the Abominable Yeti, which I did notice in my looking at this yesterday. I thought, wait a second, Abominable? Does it have to be all this cold breath, chilling gaze, and stuff? What about a Bigfoot? So I searched for Bigfoot, and you could probably find a custom Bigfoot, but also on D&D Beyond, where I am getting my stat blocks from, there is just a Yeti, a non-abominable variety of this creature, which is interesting. Excuse me. Okay, so challenge rating 9. I believe the normal Yeti, which I suppose I can mention now because by the time we get to Wise, it will be forgotten that we even talked about Abominable Yeti. Very strong, giant levels of strength, not very intelligent, but still, you know, pretty high up there with a 9. Shit ton of hit points, yowzas. Dark vision, that's interesting. I wonder why that is, dark vision. When I picture Yeti, they're sort of out in the frozen wasteland where, if anything, the brightness of the snow is going to make you snowblind, so you don't want super perceptive brightness blinding you. Yeah, that's right. Fear of fire. Okay, sure. Keen smell, that makes sense. Snow camouflage, that's an obvious one. Multi-attack, how many does it get? Chilling gaze and make 2 claw attacks. Can you use Chilling Gaze? Oh, okay, so it gets 3 attacks. Chilling Gaze. Okay, so let's read this one. Targets one creature, 30 feet. Constitution of 18, or paralyzed. And cool little feature of D&D Beyond. If I go over paralyzed, it will explain what it is there. For 1 minute, and you can make saves on each of your turns. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Cold breath, I believe, was other than some of the stats and hit points and such. That was one of the main differences between Yeti and Abominable. I don't think the normal Yeti had cold breath. 30 feet air, sort of a dragon breathy like, which is interesting because when you think of Yeti, like the one that totally exists in this real world right now, part of its lore, let's say, is not that it blows cold breath like friggin' Superman. Keen hunters, terrifying howlers, as opposed to the non-terrifying howlers, the howlers. Okay. Before an avalanche, brutal rampagers. Abominalities larger than normal Yeti. Okay, so that explains some of the stats as well. And let's get a look at some of the picks here. Yeah, this one I like here. This is sort of what I pick. Then you could throw one of these at it. Get a little Yukon Cornelius in there. I like it. Let's move on to spell aid. Your spell bolsters your allies with toughness and resolve. Choose up to 3 creatures within range. Each target's hit points maximum and current hit points increased by 5 for the duration. Second level? Yeah, okay. Good if... you know what this would be good for? If you were, because it's only second level, so that's not too bad. It lasts for 8 hours as well. Say you were a cleric. Yeah, you have to be a cleric or a paladin to use this. You're a cleric, and all of your team is down. If you were to cast this on them, it would bring them all up with the 5 hit points, bring them up to 10, which is not insignificant. Depending on your level, of course, but still going to get them up and fighting for a round. So that's pretty cool. Spell 3rd level higher, 5 for each slot above second. Okay, so yeah, you could cast it at higher levels as well, which is always fun. A decent spell. Oh shit, I forgot to rate the Abominable Yeti, which is what we're here for, of course. Okay, so writing for the Abominable Yeti, and of course this is based on my desire to use it in a campaign. You know what? I'll go a solid 4.37596. So, that's, as far as ratings, pretty good. I liked it. Aid, it's not as exciting. It's got a boring name. I'm going to go a 2. Yeah, this is the lowest thing I've given anything so far. A 2. Take that, Aid. And look at the images. What is this? Yeah, nothing D&D related. Nothing D&D related here at all. Okay, moving on to pushing this button.
Have arrived at your destination.
The Abbey of St. Sollars. Sollars. Which I will say on the note of abbeys, because we're going alphabetical order, there's quite a few abbeys. I think I maybe skipped 2 that only had like a sentence or 2, so because I can do what I want. I don't have to do every single location. I just have to do every single location. The Abbey was a medium-sized building. What happened? Was a medium-sized building made up of an entrance hall, central sanctuary, and bell tower, and a parish house. Okay, so pretty standard Abbey setup, I suppose. Entrance hall open to the outside by way of 2 large wooden doors, blah, blah, blah. Pews, buttressed ceilings. Got an altar in there. Those are lovely. Book of Sollars. Okay, does that tell us anything? Oh no, it does not exist. Stained glass windows, bell tower, floors, resident abbots. Yeah, pretty, in fact, very quintessential, aka boring, Abbey. Like, where's the flavor? Where's the little... Okay, so here's who lives here. Let's just see if he's interesting at all. Bloodstone village, human, vampire as its Abbey resident. That is interesting. Let's have a look at the images. I guess it's somewhere in this area. Why is this in there? Mountains. A little too quintessential for me. If I were to use this in a campaign, I would flavor it up with something. Although the addition of the fact that it's a vampire gives me some cool ideas. Which, speaking of, let's move on to our scenario. I have called the scenario Hairless Yeti Gives Aid. So if you're unfamiliar with the scenario, it's where I take the 3 things that I have rated, spell, monster, and location, and jam them into one scenario you could perhaps use in your scenario, use in your campaign, use in your backstory, use for inspiration of some sort. The Abbey of St. Sollars is a temple to the god Ilmater. Ilmater. Who, among other things, is a god who encourages his worshippers to help those who suffer. In other words, to give them aid. An abominable Yeti was driven from the high peaks at a young age as he suffered from alopecia. If you're unfamiliar with alopecia, it's where you don't have any body hair. Making mountain living untenable, not to mention others of his kind treated him like a freak. He stumbled into that Abbey was and the inhabitants of the Abbey took pity on him and raised him from a youth. He has managed to, under their tutelage, learn a few cleric spells like aid, and hopes to travel the realm finding those like him who have been cast aside by their respective races due to physical abnormalities they cannot control. Which I think is like maybe a little tropey, the having a backstory where you are different among your respective race that you choose to play as. But still, I thought it worked here, and a little twist of adding alopecia. So, I like it. Moving on to questions. And answers, maybe. Okay, so once again, we'll just mention viewer in quotes until I start taking questions from the Underdark down below, which, as I am recording this before I have aired any episodes, that might be a little bit of a difficulty. So what I do is take questions from various Facebook groups, and then sort of answer them there, which is just fun to do, something I like to do, good for killing time. The question here was, how do I avoid a TPK when PCs have done dumb things to get into an untenable situation? So, total party kill, that's where the entire party is wiped out, PC, player character. Let me give you some of the details. And basically, going forward, a lot of the times, either when I start pulling questions, and probably more from Facebook, just because a lot of the times the questions are long paragraphs, is I'll dumb them down a bit. Not dumb them down, condense them a bit. Basically, this person had, it was a vampire scenario, so one of my ideas was that that they are captured instead of killed. That's sort of a first and foremost right there. And because it was vampire related, they could be imprisoned in a blood farm, which is something I've used in a campaign. Kind of a cool idea. It came to me from, I think, and who could say where ideas come from, there was an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer where they travel to a sort of alternate where vampires have sort of taken over. This is the evil dimension, as shows do from time to time for some reason, and that was something they were developing, was blood farms. Anyways, where they have to convince the other captives to join them in a mass revolt, but you could let them stew and be blooded for a few days so that they are weak, and then could throw monsters at them that they would typically kill with ease. Yeah, so my thought there was, depending on their level, they're gonna have certain baddies that are easy, like a sturge maybe. It's kind of cool because they suck blood, and they maybe have no trouble killing one. However, if you give them a few levels of exhaustion from the blood loss, suddenly monsters that were once easy become difficult, which is always kind of a cool thing to do. Minions, weakened state, yeah. Okay, so one thing I wanted to talk about as well is he said dumb things are leading to deaths, and this is a theory I wanted to put out, and something, a way I try to run my games. It's this thought that I don't ever want the players to all die from bad rolls. If they do things, as this person indicates, and good rolls don't save them, or they can die if they do dumb things and they just die, and they have bad rolls. But I don't want that combination of they did everything right and yet they still died. That doesn't seem fun. It would, to me as a player, would be frustrating. So for me as a DM, I don't want to give that frustration to others. And then the other sort of side of the coin is, I don't want I like the fact that they can experiment and do interesting things that may seem dumb at the time and maybe end up being dumb, but then really cool really cool high rolls make those things work out for them in the end, is sort of my thought there. So those two scenarios I aim for, the balance in between those two. It's just I don't want to kill them and be frustrated for, we did everything we could and yet we still died, because that's not fun. Huh?
It's done!
Speaking of done, so is this episode. Yes, we did it. This episode and every episode, I'd like to say at the end, a sign off, if you will, that should we ever reach that point where this thing makes money, I will be donating 100%, 50% of profits to takethis.org. I'm going to make a little money. But until that happens, for every 100 subscribers that this channel receives, I will be personally donating $10 to takethis.org, which is a wonderful organization that focuses on mental health. as well as intertwining that with the sort of world of gaming. So perfect for me on many levels. So basically, things that could help with that regard is the aforementioned subscribing and throw in the odd like. That helps the channel grow, get more subscribers. It's a whole snowball thing. I don't like asking for this, so that's why I decided to bribe for it in the form of donation. Folks, I guess that's about it. We did it. Bites. That leaves the final thing to say, which is the final thing I've said at the end of every single one of my 500 plus podcast episodes, the Libercube, if you care to go over and watch that. And that is, it's nice to be nice to the nice.